We're here today with Matt LeMay, who is one of my favorite product voices. He is on a book tour right now, just launched a really cool book. Matt, can you tell us the name of the book?
The name of the book is Impact First Product Teams.
Very good title and a great topic, which we're going to talk about today with him. He is one of the foremost voices on impact and product, someone that I listen to. And every single time that I see a podcast or anything that has him in it, I am glued to it. And I can say that one of my most favorite interviews that he recently done was with Leah, who we just launched a couple of weeks ago as our first impact
She's the best.
driven expert. Yeah, it's like this wasn't planned, but you are two of my favorites, and I front loaded you. So Matt, welcome. I'm so
Thanks
happy
so
to have
much.
you.
So happy to be here.
Today, we are going to start off with a topic that I think is near and dear to your heart. You've spoken a lot about the importance of understanding impact and understanding it early in the process.
Yep.
So I would love for you to share your definition of impact. What is it for our listeners?
Yeah, impact is what moves the business closer to success on its own terms. I think that understanding what success means to the business at large is really key to doing product management well. It's one of those things that, it's funny, as I've been doing this book tour, there's been at least one person in every city who said, well, doesn't everybody do that? Isn't that just how product management works? You just understand the business model comprehensively and how the business works and what the next big milestones are, and then you just build into that. And there's usually this kind of uncomfortable chuckle that erupts in the room after that question, because yes, in theory, that would make a lot of sense, but in practice, that is not often how product development goes. And I think a lot of folks who have worked in product development are surprised at how challenging it can be to get that information in a concise and actionable way.
Yeah, or maybe they have the common affliction that I've seen in businesses where they just have so many goals.
Oh yeah.
And so many directions that you're just like, which one of these impacts do I try and go after?
Yeah, absolutely.
I want a quick follow-up. You said on their own terms.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that exactly?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting, right? Because there is an attempt and there is a wish that I understand very well to generalize this and say, this is about profit, this is about revenue, this is about growth. But I think it depends on your business model and your funding model and your team within the business, right? Different businesses define success in different ways at different stages. So I've worked with some startups that are actively not trying to generate revenue. They're trying to demonstrate enough growth that they can raise the next round of funding. I've worked with some venture-backed businesses that are trying to demonstrate a path to profitability. I've worked with some publicly traded companies that are really trying to show their revenue projections for the next quarter are going to be achieved. So different business models, different funding models, different companies have different definitions of success that are also on different cadences, right? Sometimes, again, for companies that raise venture capital, it's about raising that next round. For companies that are publicly traded, it's about that next quarterly report. If you can understand what success means to the business and on what cadence the business measures success, you're in a really good position to build into and contribute to that success in your own team.
Tell me what you think teams do wrong when they're estimating the impact, because I think we all want to have high impact and it's easy to inflate it. So are there tactics that apply to everybody to be realistic and accurate?
I mean, I think that the challenge is to not get too hung up on being too accurate. We call it estimation for a reason, right? Especially when you're estimating the impact of something you haven't built yet. It's impossible to predict it perfectly. So the way I frame it up in the book is that you actually want to understand what the most impact is that something could possibly have, because practically speaking, I've worked with a lot of teams that put a lot of time and resources into building things that have no chance of delivering enough impact to be meaningful to the business. You know, a team that, I was talking to somebody from a product team a while ago, and they said, we're great at impact estimation. Our team is working on something this year which could deliver $10,000 to the business. And I'm like, okay, well, you have estimated the impact, but is $10,000 really a great return on the investment that the business has made in this product team? So again, I think as with a lot of things in product development, we can get hung up on each of these things on prioritization, impact estimation as sort of an abstract exercise and try to do it the right way. But it's important to remember why we do it. And we do impact estimation to figure out what's worth doing and what's not worth doing in the first place. So to that end, some rough estimation, some Googling to say, have people tried to solve this problem before? If so, how much of an uplift did it deliver? And then how many people do we think it's going to reach? Doing that as true estimation can be really valuable because, again, you're usually comparing different things you might build, right? So you don't need an absolute number. You need to be able to look at the things you're evaluating and say, if we have 10 things we could pursue and only 2 of them are actually going to help us achieve our specific goals, that puts us in a much better place to make decisions moving forward.
Metrics do you look at, and maybe you can differentiate between some vanity ones or some value ones? What are the tactics that you recommend?
Christina Vodka's fantastic book, Radical Focus, really shifted my perspective on this because she has a visual that I recreate in the book about keeping team and department goals no more than one step away from company goals. So no more than one why statement or one mathematical operator. And that was really the big unlock for me in writing this book, where I was like, okay, once you see that, you can't unsee it. Whether you use OKRs or North Star metrics or however you do it, the metrics that matter are the ones that are no more than one step away from what the company really cares about. So to use an example, I worked with a company a while ago that was really focused on revenue. And the team I was working with had built a lot of features to kind of try to go from being a single product company to a multi-product platform company. And we sat down and we were like, well, why are you building all these things? And they said, well, because multi-product users have a higher customer lifetime value. I was like, oh, how much higher? Like, we actually have data on this. Here's the number. So we could look at that and say, okay, in order to build into the company's revenue goals a certain amount, how many single product users do we need to convert to multi-product users? So we had this team goal, which again is one step away, right? We can say we need to upgrade this many users because we believe that doing so will generate this much revenue for the business, which builds into the revenue goals of the business this much. So broadly speaking, I think if you have goals that are no more than one understandable step away from what the company cares about the most, then those are valuable metrics. Every step away from them you get, the risk of them being vanity metrics is greater and greater. And when you have those companies with lots and lots and lots of goals, the odds of those being vanity metrics get greater and greater and greater.
Can you give an example of the biggest offenders of vanity metrics that you've seen?
I mean, it's
Like
tough, right?
downloads?
Because things like the ones that bother me the most are the operational ones, like velocity and like how many features we're shipping in a given amount of time. I think most product people understand intuitively that those are output metrics or vanity metrics or whatever we want to call them. But I also think that there is an understandable fear of setting goals that are outside of your control, right? If you are one step away from what matters to the business, these are probably market level goals. These are customer level goals. These are goals that you can't just tick a box or build something and say, we did it. You are ultimately accountable for things outside of your control. And that is really scary on a human level. So I think getting people comfortable with that idea that, like, look, the success of the business depends on things outside of your control. You can't just choose to have a successful business. You need to be listening to your customers. You need to be learning from the market. These are things that are not nice to haves or abstract best practices. This is what we need to do if we want to have a successful business. I found that when you set your goals no more than one step away from what the company cares about, you're actually more likely to do those things. You're more likely to do user interviews. You're more likely to do competitive analysis. You're more likely to do those things that you might not be as likely to do if you are just focused on delivery for delivery's sake.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. So know the company's goals, again, really, really critical to having impact, and then orienting the way that you evaluate work as closely as possible to that, focusing on outcome over output.
Exactly.
These are, I think, really just gold standards now in product, and people who are really focused on like, oh, are we fast enough? Maybe are missing the point of like, maybe you delivered 10 features really fast and none of them hit because you have no idea what your market or user wants.
Yeah, and now you have 10 features you need to maintain. So you actually made things worse.
Right. Or you have to spend time trying to kill them if you're intelligent. When
Yes.
you get rid of the product bloat, now you have to try and figure, okay, how do I sunset these? Like that's a whole other problem to solve. Okay. Okay. Let's get beyond some of these service questions that we have a tendency to ask. You mentioned talking to customers.
Oh yeah.
That's my jam. Love
Yep.
the customer. I'm having like 4 or 5. At one point it was like a day and I was like, okay, slow down. Let's do maybe 4 or 5 a week. And that's the rate that I'm at now for continuous discovery. And I want to get beyond a lot of things that trigger these conversations, which are feature requests.
Yeah.
This is the reason, bug requests and feature requests. This is the number one reason why people want to talk to us. And I use that as like the door opener. Yeah, let's talk about your thing. And then I always have other questions. So I wonder kind of what were your go-to questions that help you understand the user in their motivations, their desire, and in the outcomes that you're trying to bring to the business.
Yeah, it's funny. I really struggled when I started doing user interviews. I was not good at it. I was very lucky to have a mentor, my friend Trisha Wong, who's an incredible ethnographic researcher, who let me do bad research on the way to doing good research. And when I talk to nervous user researchers, I often say, like, you're going to have to let the product managers do bad user research if they're going to do good user research. The main thing I learned from working with her, coming from a product management background where so much of what we do is stakeholder management, you're going into meetings, you're meeting with executives, you want to sound smart and competent and like you know what you're talking about and you know the product. When you're talking to users, throw that all out the window. Like you want to just go in as if you've never encountered your own product before, almost. Just like ask them to walk you through it. Ask them, to tell you about a day they had. Try to get as close to their reality as possible. In my last book, in Product Management and Practice, one of my guiding principles for product managers is to live in your user's reality. And I think one of the hard things to understand is that in your user's reality, your product probably doesn't matter that much. They don't wake up first thing in the morning and think about your product. They certainly don't care about the politics of your organization. That literally does not exist to them. So I think that part of the challenge is to keep one foot grounded enough in your user's reality to ask them what matters to them, which means that you are not positioning yourself as an expert or as a person who has the answers, but rather as a curious learner. And the more you can be surprised and find things out about your product and about your user that you didn't know in the first place, the more valuable that is. But it's really hard to make that switch. The way you engage with users and the way you engage with stakeholders is almost like complete opposite of each other. And it took me a long time to figure that out.
I think this is what's interesting to me about this is that it kind of solidifies the way that I go into a lot of these interviews. I don't like to do too much prep.
Yeah.
I like to know, like, okay, what's the business? What are they doing? And then I like to be open-minded enough and in a beginner mindset where I can say, like, okay,
Yeah.
you're in this role in this business. What's your context right now? Like, what's going on in your world and where is your problem space? It reminds me a lot of the mom tests and questions that you would just ask, like, tell me about your life, tell me about your day to day. Just let me understand you. I think is a really good interview, and stop trying to orient them towards a feature or a situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lot in consulting, obviously. You help a lot of people figure this stuff out, and it's not easy. So tell me about the work that you do and what signals you look for to know if a team is off track in terms of their focus on impact, and how do you get them back on track? I know it's probably different business to business, but
Yeah,
maybe a couple of examples.
so much of it is about subtraction. Teams really struggle to subtract. It's always easier to add things than to take things away. And in most cases, the challenge I see, as we discussed earlier on, is that teams have too many goals. They're spending too long setting their OKRs and not enough time using their OKRs. They're going through goal setting as an exercise disconnected from actually planning what to build. It's been really interesting to me just asking teams, for example, like, how do you use your OKRs in sprint planning? And the answer for a lot of teams is like, that's an absurd question. Why would we do that? OKRs are something we do every quarter. Sprint planning is just when we go and plan stuff to deliver. It's like, well, then how are you getting value out of either of these things? So I've been thinking a lot about this, and the big issue I'm seeing is that, we talk about outcomes over output, but I think it's the connection between outcomes and output where a lot of the really interesting stuff happens. It's the relationship between these things. It's the systems. It's not that teams have tactics but don't have strategy. It's that the connection between strategy and tactics is really unclear. So looking at ways to kind of build that connection from both sides to really strengthen that is always really, really, really interesting to me. And it's also sort of a harder thing to see. It's easier for teams to see when they don't have a strategy or when they don't have goals than when they have goals and they have work, or they have strategy and they have tactics. But these things are kind of progressing as if they are two disconnected systems. That's what I'm mostly looking at these days.
Yeah, the danger of like cascading too far, which is why that one step away is maybe the most interesting and valuable thing that you can do. I think it's really, for us at Usersnap, the way that we're doing it right now is trying to have a clear vision, have a clear strategy that everybody knows.
Yeah.
If I ask anyone on my team, like they need to know it.
Yep.
And it's something that I repeat a lot to the point where people are like, "Hey, Shannon, we get it." And I'm like, "Good. Now I know because you're telling me stop talking about it." And I think that's a good signal for people when your team tells you, "Yeah." Then you can probably stop talking about it. Until then, assume they don't know it.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
they don't. And then using that to drive a very small number of initiatives.
Yeah.
Very small. And orienting all the work around those impacts. I think that this is the easiest way to do that. So I look for like, do we have too many goals?
Yeah.
More than 3 or 4. Something's wrong. Maybe even 1 or 2 would be a good way to orient.
Start with 1 or 2. Just start with what really matters the most. Again, I think folks struggle because when you have those goals set at a high enough altitude, they are both out of your control and they require collaboration across teams, which is another whole conversation when product people are like, we can't do that without marketing. It's like, yeah, that's kind of the whole point. Like,
yeah, go do it with marketing.
Yeah, go do it with marketing. That's okay. Like, yeah, the people bringing your product to market and the people building the product should talk to each other sometimes. This should not be controversial. But again, I think we're however many years into these conversations around autonomous teams. And I think people have really misinterpreted a lot of that to mean that teams should be able to just like do stuff without ever talking to anyone else. And that's just not how it works.
I think
Got to
that
deal with
leads to more
people.
output.
It's human work.
Doesn't it? If you're just focused on your team,
Then you're not going to be doing anything meaningful. Like,
right. It's incredibly hard to have value when you're not cross-functional.
Absolutely.
So the way that we work, and I think it's the way that works the best for us right now. I don't know if it's like a general good thing for everybody, but what works well for Usersnap is the goal is cross-functional.
Yeah, exactly.
And it has outcomes that can be like a main one that's like, what's the purpose driving this thing? Like that's our outcome that we're trying to get. And then everybody has their little stuff. Like marketing will look at certain like top of funnel, mid funnel, and bottom funnel metrics, and that's important. And not everybody cares about that, but everybody does kind of get the point of what we're trying to do, and we measure that. And I think that's a good cross-functional way to set metrics in those spaces.
Yeah, what you want to avoid is a situation where the functional goals and the cross-functional goals are at odds or disconnected from each other. Again, it's that disconnection that almost scares me more than tension, because tension is still systematic. You can look at tension between goals and be like, all right, how do we navigate this? It's when they're totally separate from each other that I really start to worry.
Yeah, which is why I like having company goals and then team goals and then, individual goals and this like sort of OKR mess of everyone has to have a connecting thing that they have to create that has to be different. I really don't subscribe to that.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's been so great chatting with you, Matt. Thanks for taking the time.
As always.
To do this
Can I ask
little
you a
mini
question?
masterclass. Yeah, you can.
It's like self-centered question, but you said that something I said was your second favorite thing I've said. And now I really want to know what my first favorite thing of yours I've said
Now
is.
I'm in trouble because I don't remember the exact quote. Okay, I know that it was about the impact spiral of death.
Okay.
Like it's more of a like a catchphrase, really.
Okay.
That's the thing that I was like, I love that phrase, like the impact spiral of death, where you're just like doing so many little things that have no impact and really trying to like just accomplish a lot of tasks without any real thought or imagination around what is this going to bring.
I have a new metaphor for describing that I'm road
Launch
testing
it.
now,
Launch it.
which is that like if I gave you the option of fixing the engine of a car or decorating the hood of the car with rhinestones, which one would you do? You're going to decorate the hood of the car with rhinestones. And if you have 10 teams decorating the hood of the car with rhinestones, then the hood of the car is going to get so heavy that you can't lift it to fix the engine anymore. And that's what product development feels like in most organizations.
Oh my God. That's a scary thought.
It's pretty scary, isn't it?
It is very visual. Like
I,
seeing the car in my mind.
yeah, it gives me an excuse to show a slide with a car covered in rhinestones.
Oh, I bet you had fun like generating AI things for that.
I didn't even need to. There are people who have cars covered in faux diamonds. There's a lot of people with a lot of money and time on their hands out there.
Went to the source. I love it. That's a great question. And now you know not one, but two, maybe three now famous Matt catchphrases that you can go and use to drive your team towards impact. If you're getting pushback, just pull out one of these phrases.
Amazing.
Thank you so much, Matt. It's been great chatting with you as always. Have a good day.
You too. Thanks.